How on earth is Michigan State going to win this game on Saturday? Well, they got to start with these three things. And then, yes, Noah Eagle, NBC play-by-play man, he joins the show. Let's go.
You are Locked On Spartans, your daily podcast on the Michigan State Spartans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of Locked On Spartans is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Spartan friends, Spartan family, Locked On Spartans listeners, thank you all so much for tuning in to Locked On Spartans, your team in green and white 5 days a week right here in the Locked On Podcast Network. Please rate, review, subscribe, comment below your score prediction if you're watching on YouTube. And after you do all that, get ready for segments 2 and 3 with Noah Eagle. Super fired up about this one. Nice enough to offer up some of the very little time he has during game weeks right here Locked On Spartans. You might not hear him if you're going to be at the game, but if you're going to be like me, watching from home, you're going to hear his voice all night Saturday. All right, guys, let's talk about this game. MSU opens up as 6.5-point underdogs. A lot of like the analytics out there, S&P Plus being one of them, has MSU as like 10-point underdogs too. So let's not get it twisted. This would be an upset win for our Spartans. And, well, how are they going to do it? It's got to start with these 3 things, all right? Number 1, I hate to boil it down to something so simple, so elementary, but tackling. Tackling. Yes, one of the core foundations of the sport of football, tackling. Now, why am I just mentioning that? Is it just for no reason? Of course not. No. It's also not the reason they lost the last 2 games to Ohio State, to Oregon 6 days after that, but 35 combined missed tackles in those 2 games. If they continue that sky-high trend, well, there's no shot that they're going to slow down Caleb Johnson or the Iowa offense. Even as one-dimensional as they are, you can't have a missed tackle, of Caleb Johnson in the backfield turn into a 15-yard carry, which he can do in Kenneth Walker-like fashion. I don't think I'm over-exaggerating at all when I say that Caleb Johnson is one of the best Big Ten running backs in recent history. I was blown away by what he could do against Washington, Minnesota. So was the Iowa coaching staff. In that Minnesota game, tight game at halftime, they realized, that Gophers can't tackle him. Caleb Johnson's really good. They had 24 rushes, 6 pass attempts in that second half, ended up running away with it. You cannot have that happen at Spartan Stadium. But guys, the good news is we're not asking Michigan State to do something they haven't done so far this year. They actually started the first 4 games with just 33 missed tackles in those first 4 games combined. Yes, a step down in competition from Ohio State and Oregon and arguably Iowa, but they did start the season as one of the better tackling teams in the country. More good news for you guys. Iowa is so one-dimensional that you're going to get more than just 6-man boxes. You're going to get most likely Jordan Hall back from injury. You're going to have more linebackers there to help with the tackling than you did last week when it was just a 60-minute disaster against Oregon, really. No, I shouldn't say 60-minute. It was actually the first half is where Oregon really made their hay in the run game, and then some adjustments made by Rossi, bringing up more guys closer to the line of scrimmage. Regardless, you know that Iowa's going to run. That's going to help your identity on defense. Because why are we so confident in that they're going to run the ball? Well, this stat right here from Cade McNamara, I actually have 2 for you. The first one is that in 6 games so far this year, he has thrown for over 110 passing yards just in 2 games. Now, that doesn't mean, of course, that they're doomed. I mean, he just threw for, 108 yards against Washington? Was no problem there. He threw for, 60-some yards against Minnesota? No problem there. But still, you know what the name of the game is going to be for Iowa. The second stat is that Cade McNamara, in his whole career, just has 1 passing touchdown against Power 4 teams that are not aided by the Connor Stallions era at Michigan. Of course, we all remember Cade McNamara throwing for 8 gazillion bajillion yards against us. That's a real number. At Spartan Stadium in that storied 2021 game. All right. Little different weapons he had back then, both on the field and in the bleachers or in the crane, wherever Connor Stallions was that day. Last week against Washington was his first touchdown pass against a Power 4 team since 2021. It's been a slow roll for Cade McNamara since coming back from that ACL injury he suffered against Michigan State And when we talked with Trent Condon of Locked On Hawkeyes not too long ago, they started to have inklings that, things might not be okay in the passing game during one of their open practices in the spring where he threw 8 of 24. Shout out Kobe Bryant, but you know what? They have to rely on the run game, and they do it well, because when we say, you just got to shut down the run, I don't want to be mistaken. I'm not saying that's easy by any stretch of the imagination, because let's get some scary Caleb Johnson numbers out of the way. He has 5.6 yards per carry after contact. That is second best in the nation, only behind superstar out of Boise, Ashton Genty. He has 43 missed tackles forced. That is fifth best in the nation. He has 25 runs of 10-plus yards. That is third best in the nation. He also has 20 15-plus yard runs. That is best in the nation. So, yes, Caleb Johnson, whether it's good blocking by the Iowa offensive line, which does happen, or even when things fall apart, again, very K9-esque, he finds a hole that only a mouse that can collapse its rib cage can really find. He's special. So, and that's why he has 937 rushing yards on the season right now. That is second best in the nation. And guys, to put that in comparison, that's 200 more rushing yards than Michigan State has as a whole. So let's get to point number 2 of what Michigan State has to do here. Use Aiden Childs' legs. All right, they've been a little reluctant to do that on designed runs. We've all seen how he can scramble, extend plays. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about actual design quarterback runs out of the shotgun. Okay, they did it 4 times last week against Oregon. That was the most designed runs they've called for Aiden so far this season. It did pretty well, 7.7 yards per carry. Now, that's a very high number to sustain, but it's been bad enough handing the ball off that, I think the offensive staff realizes that they need to turn running the football into a 11-on-11 game. Instead of Aiden Childs handing the ball off, which, again, has been a struggle. We've been just talking about that ad nauseum here the last few weeks. Have that running back get up in front and be an additional blocker. That's what we mean by 11-on-11. Instead of Aiden just checking out after the play, your 11th guy checking out of the play after he hands the ball off. No, you need all hands on deck. Now, I'm not saying you run Aiden like 18 times. I think the reason they've run so minimally with Aiden is to preserve his health. And you still have 5 more games after this one. But do you do it 7, 8 times this game? I wouldn't hate to see it because, you do need some semblance of a run game. You can't just air it out completely against Iowa. Ask any team that's tried to do that. It doesn't really work well against Phil Parker and that defense. So that is the second thing you need to do. Let's use those legs. Aiden Childs, we've seen, again, guys, we've seen it on the scrambles, him extending plays. No, like just actual designed runs. Number 3, and what I've done the first 2, tackling, use Aiden Childs' legs, are things that we've seen Michigan State do at some point in the season. Like, that's not fantasy land. This third thing that I'm asking, that you're asking at home or driving to the tailgate, wherever you are right now, this is fantasy. I'm going to shoot you all straight. It's just not turning the ball over or limiting the turnovers. Right, guys? Michigan State, if you forgot over the bye week, they have 14 turnovers so far this season. That is second most in Power 4 football, only behind Peyton Thorne's Fighting Auburn Tigers. They have 15 turnovers on the season. But again, asking for MSU at this point to not turn the ball over, that's like my lovely wife of 8 years, who's known me for 17 years. That's how long we've been together. Asking me to not think about this game or to watch this game on my phone during the wedding we're going to be at this Saturday. At some point in your life, at some point in your season, you just are who you are. All right, MSU, it's in my DNA. I'm sorry, sweetie. Go have fun on the dance floor. I will be watching the second quarter here. Michigan State football. Unfortunately, turning the ball over is in their DNA. Can they just not, for once, though, can they just limit the turnovers to 1? Because Iowa is as good as any at punishing teams when they turn the ball over. Iowa also themselves, they don't really turn the ball over, too. They're top 20 in the nation at turnover margin. All right, Michigan State, they are 4th worst in the Power 4. Auburn, of course, they're worse than them. Same with TCU and our Big Ten brethren, UCLA. That's not great company, guys. That has been the story of the season. Turnovers. If they can tighten it up, that is a non-negotiable. Okay, this game will be a race to 20 points. It's just every Michigan State versus Iowa game you've ever seen. Who can get to 20 points the fastest? And that's going to come down to turnover margin. It's going to come down to special teams, of course, which Michigan State does pretty well at. It's going to come down to limiting red zone trips to field goals for the defense, which is something Michigan State does quite well. Talked about that yesterday with Matt Wenzel of MLive if you want more stats on that. But you have to limit the turnovers. You have to tackle Caleb Johnson. You have to finish the plays on defense. And then, you know what? You're not going to get away with having zero run game. It's time to deploy Aiden Childs and his legs. All right, guys, we are going to be back here with Noah Eagle, NBC play-by-play man, here in a hot second. But first, need to talk your ear off about Hims. That is right, folks. Hims, new friend of the program over here. And guys, sometimes intimate moments happen spontaneously, and we always want to be ready so we can perform in the bedroom. Well, Hims provides access to treatments that help you last longer, giving you that boost of confidence so that you can be ready whenever the mood strikes. Hims is changing the men's health care game by providing you with the access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. That is not too shabby. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works best for you. Start for free online with your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products, which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescription require an online consultation with the healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required prices vary based on product and subscription plan. And guys, it's game day. You already know what I'm rocking. It is Home Field Apparel from homefieldapparel.com. Now, I'm rocking my vintage 1979 National Championship shirt. They have logos. They have emblems. They have designs that you may have never, ever seen. But they've seen them because they talk to historians. They go searching through old programs at universities, and they spruce it up for game day. Whether you're at the stadium, at the bar, in your own home, you're going to look good and feel incredible, because I'm not giving you the runaround. These are the most comfortable articles of clothing I have, whether they're the t-shirts, long sleeve t-shirts, sweatshirt, hoodies. They feel like a cloud around your body. Also, hey, save money with your first purchase at homefieldapparel.com when you smash in promo code Spartan24. Spartan24. That's all one word, no spaces or anything, the number 24 at the end, for 15% off your first purchase at homefieldapparel.com. Again, guys, promo code Spartan24 at homefieldapparel.com. To say I'm fired up about this one, guys, that would be the understatement of the century. This is Noah Eagle. You heard him do fantastic work over at the Paris Games over the summer. Now he's going to be doing his gold medal work on NBC Saturday. Spartans, Hawkeyes. Noah, how on earth are we doing right now? We're going to just get right into the chat. You talked with Kurt Ferentz yesterday. Tell us everything he told you right now. Right now.
Yeah, no, he broke down the entire scheme they're going to use. He actually gave us a play-by-play of what their game plan is going to look like on both sides of the ball. So, yeah, I think we can just leak everything. It'll feel great. We'll have zero trust from coaches ever again. It'll be perfect for our jobs.
I appreciate you bringing that up here on Locked On Spartans. But is there any nugget of information that you can give in those chats, or is it pretty confidential when you do have these coaches chats before games?
No, I don't think it's necessarily confidential. I think the one thing that, especially a coach like Kirk, who's been there for so long and has done these meetings for now decades. I mean, he's won his 200th game at Iowa, so it's not like he's unfamiliar. So with a guy like that especially, but really any of them, they know that what they're telling us is fair game for us to use. Now, it's a time and a place, and they can tell us during the meeting, hey, don't mention this until kickoff, or this guy might be down. Don't talk about that until kickoff. This guy's going to be a go. Don't say that. I get that. Competitive advantage or disadvantage makes a whole lot of sense. But for the most part, they're all very understanding, and then you get varying levels of trust and willingness and openness to just let it fly. And so Kirk is, like I said, he's been doing this long enough that he's excellent in these meetings. I know exactly what I'm going to get from him. He knows exactly what we need out of him. So it's a real easy transaction.
Kirk, he just seems like a gem, and you'll be talking with Jonathan Smith after this recording, so we'll actually keep it with Iowa right now. In the first segment, really this whole week, we've been just talking about, quite frankly, how scared I am of Caleb Johnson. I wake up and he's the first thing I see when I open up my eyes, just staring right at me. But other than Caleb Johnson, when you're watching Iowa, what else should have me scared about this team? Because we spent so much time on Caleb. Surely there's got to be someone else on this team, right?
Yeah, I mean, we talked to Caleb yesterday as well, and he's just feeling, I think, the best he's felt since he got to college, which makes sense if you just watch the way he's playing. But a big reason for how he's playing, there's two things that stand out to me. I mean, we had Iowa last year. I had them twice the year before, and so I got to see him from freshman to sophomore to now junior. And there are a couple differences. One, offensive coordinator, and Tim Lester is somebody that likes to run that zone and likes to run those stretch plays, and I think that fits his style of running in particular. And then two, the way the offensive line is playing cohesively as a unit. As the season has gone on, it feels like they've gotten even better and better and better. And even Caleb was something that he mentioned to us, is just how cool it's been to watch them improve. And so when you're playing against Iowa, at least offensively, that's always going to be a scary thought. For Cade McNamara, you go back to this game last year, and this is the game he goes down and eventually ends his season. But he's an experienced guy, and he's played in big moments, and he's played obviously a lot against Michigan State. And so even though it's not quite the same defensive scheme, he's played against Minnesota, where Joe Rossi comes from, and he knows exactly what to expect with this. So he's a guy who's got experience, and anytime you have a quarterback that's experienced, it's going to be just something to keep an eye on, even if he's not the most explosive. And then obviously when it comes to Iowa, the defense is always going to be top tier. And while they're not, at least from a statistical standpoint, what they've been maybe the last 2 years, they're still top 30 basically across the board in the country. And when you're a top 30 defense in just about every category, that means it's going to be really hard to move the ball.
I'm glad you brought up that offensive line improvement from week to week, because I feel like when the year started, people were saying, the Iowa offensive line isn't all that. And then I'm watching Washington last week. It's like, these guys are so technically sound at zone blocking right now. Like, certainly progress has been made. But let's flip it to the other side. MSU wins this game if they do what? No, I know that's such a broad question, and there's nothing better to ask a broad question. But like, what do they got to do here?
I think we all know the first answer, and that's not turn the ball over.
That's a good start.
Yeah, that's got to be number one for them. If you keep the football in your hands, we've seen that they can move the ball. And I think it's a little unfair, and this was something that Kirk mentioned yesterday, and I know it's something that Coach Smith and Aiden Childs and some of the veterans on this team have all talked about, is it's a little unfair to judge, I would say, what they did the last two games against two behemoth type of programs. And even with that, they did have opportunities in the red zone. They did move the ball well enough to put themselves in position to score. And they've got arguably the best kicker in the Big Ten. So you're always going to be somewhat in a field goal range once you get into plus territory. They've got all the pieces to me. Wide receiver core looks strong. And you've got a freshman in Marsh who has really stepped forward. But you've got these veteran guys who I've done a ton of games from this team the last couple of years. I think I've had 6 games in the last 2 years with Spartans. And they always had great receivers. That was never a concern. And a lot of those guys are still here. So you kind of blend the old with the new, and you see that. You've got good tight end play right now. Obviously, 2 really good running backs. And Nate Carter had a great game last year against Iowa. So it's not necessarily something that is going to be new for him. To me, the offensive line has to play well. They've got to protect Childs, and Childs has to protect the ball, because Iowa's offense is not necessarily one that's going to blow you out just by themselves. What they did last week was they used excellent field position. They were opportunistic. They had some great special teams plays and returns, and that's the other thing that you've got to keep in mind with Legion. And obviously, Michigan State's going to be extra wary given what happened in this matchup last year with the punt return. But if you flip the field properly and you play the field position battle properly and you take care of the football, you're going to be in the game in the fourth quarter, and that's all you can ask for.
It's the quintessential Michigan State-Iowa game. Like, first team to 20, punting's going to win this game. But
yeah,
I like that you brought the breath of fresh air talking about, the good skill position players, especially the running backs, because Locked On Spartans listeners know I'm not the highest on the run game so far this year, but you know what? Thanks for throwing a bone to the running backs at least, because there are some people that disagree. They're like, no, they're fine. They just got to work things out. So, no, look at you just adding even more fans to your collection over there.
But I think, man, I listen, you just watch those 2 guys in particular, and you can see they're big bruisers, and that's what you need in the Big Ten. I mean, we've now gone And we've had 3 out of the 4 teams, I believe, already, the 4 new teams coming to the Big Ten. And the one thing that they all stressed was that physicality.
Yeah.
And they've recognized that it is important to have physicality. And Spartan fans saw Jordan James' physical running can be really, really effective for Oregon. Travion Anderson and Quinshon Judkins, very effective for Ohio State. Penn State's got 2 bruisers. So to have 2 bruisers in the backfield, in my opinion, is not just important, it might be necessary to win in this conference. And look, you're sitting at 3-3 here. You cannot abandon the run, especially against this team. They are so sound in their pass defense that you have to stay in front and ahead of schedule, because if you get behind schedule against Iowa, it's basically good night.
Still more to come, including our 5 best bets of the week. We are 3 weeks in a row, 4-1 at 5 best bets, and we've been doing it over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Guys, you've heard us talk about the spread throughout the week. All right, it's 5.5 as things stand right now. That's how many points Michigan State is getting in this game. Also, if you want to look ahead to next week against Michigan, right now, Michigan State plus 9.5 point underdogs. If you're liking that number where it is right now, well, jump on this Iowa game, jump on that Michigan game, or mix it up with some same-game parlays, too, where you can guess who's going to score the first touchdown, over-under on receiving and rushing yards. You name it, FanDuel will probably have it. And for NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, well, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is over at FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Again, guys, FanDuel.com. So let's talk about Oregon, Ohio State. You called a brilliant game last week on NBC. One of the old cliches, adages, whatever buzzword you want to use, after big games for these teams, a letdown spot, for example. We just saw Alabama have it with Vanderbilt. And no, I got to know. Look, I'm excited for this game. Iowa fans, I'm sure, are excited for this game. This is not a top 5 matchup. But on top of that, what a dazzling night. You have a player spitting in someone else's face. On the kickoff, you have someone just rifling it right off the player 10 yards away from them. And then the cherry on top, a guy sliding at the end of a scramble with 0 time on the clock. Like, it wasn't just a great matchup, but it had probably everything an announcer can dream of. So, Noah, are we worried about an announcer letdown spot right now coming up this week? With all due respect to all teams involved.
Not a chance. Not a chance.
Okay.
No, you're right. Last week was bizarre and amazing all at once. And all of those different things, I don't think I've ever seen a collection of events happen in one game quite like that. But I look back to last year, and we had this top 10 matchup, Ohio State at Notre Dame, that similarly went down to essentially the final play of the game. And the following week was Iowa, Michigan State. So it's back-to-back years with this matchup. And I said, everyone kept saying to me last year, like, oh, that's got to feel terrible. You got to go from that to that. And I'm like, no, I think it's going to be fun because it's going to be competitive. And all I asked for is a competitive game. And sure enough, sorry to all the Spartan fans, but Cooper DeJean provides an electric play at the end
Unfortunately,
of that. No doubt. Kinnick was great. And so I expect exactly the same for this game. And that was something that Kirk Ferentz said to us yesterday that stuck with me is I think he thinks that people are undervaluing what the Spartans are because they just played the 2 teams they just played and they had a tough loss to Boston College. But you look outside of that, obviously the first 3 games were great. They had a great comeback against Maryland. And the BC game, they had a 4th down stop at the goal line. They go down the field and they kick a field goal. So it wasn't, I think with a lot of maybe lesser teams, you look at, okay, you finally have something good, but you can't capitalize. Well, they did. They went 60 yards down the field and capitalized. I think we've seen that they can move the football. Again, it's going to come down to can they take care of the football? And if everything else comes into place for them, there's no reason they can't win this game and they can't win a couple more games and give themselves a chance to be bowl eligible this year. They're more than talented enough. That's never been the question. So I hear all the people saying it's not going to be – I'm not expecting it to be what we had last week. I'm expecting it to have its own personality this week, and that's what makes it fun, and that's what makes every week exciting.
It's the beauty of Big Ten football, just nice, rugged, 1st to 20 sort of game. From going to, plays you can't prepare for, like, someone spitting in someone else's face. I do just want to pick your brain on what is your prep like on game day? Obviously, the game's kicking off. You do Big Ten under the lights over there for NBC. What's your Saturday looking like? Are we going to find you at the tennis courts taking the edge off? Because it's probably stressful broadcasting the game. Like, do you just sleep in until 6? Like, walk us through the typical Saturday for you.
Oh, I wish I could get a little tennis in game day. That'd be nice, especially if I could kick my spotter's butt. That'd be really good. I think I still need my revenge because he beat me the last time we played. Anyway,
Sure.
that's a side and a personal side. No, so it actually varies based on the time zone we're in. But because we're back in Eastern Zone, that helps a lot and gets us back to our normal routine. So on a game day, we wake up and we do our production meeting as an entire crew at 10 a.m. And so that usually goes for about 45 minutes. We go through all the elements of the broadcast, what we want to talk about, and kind of have an idea of the direction we want to take things in, which is always great. And then after that, I do a little bit of work. Usually I'll get some food of some kind because nutrients are important. So lunchtime, that helps. I'll try to do that. I'll watch the games as I'm eating and working, just finishing up last couple hours of work. Around 2 o'clock or so, I'll probably go to the gym just to clear the head, like you said.
Nice.
And that's good to just get energized as well. Make sure that you're ready and keep your mind at the right speed before the game. Shower, get changed, and then around 4 o'clock, I head over for a 7:30 game. And in those 3 hours, usually I'll get there by 4:30. In those 3 hours, I do a number of things. The first thing I always do is get settled in the booth, make sure my notes are out in the right place. And then I finish highlighting any of the stuff that I didn't finish highlighting. So a lot of times that's the meeting notes with both teams. So I'll take the time to finish highlighting those, reread those. So they're kind of locked in my head at that point instead of having to look down constantly and reading them. And then after that, I go and I find the broadcasters for each team, say hello, chat for a little bit. Maybe they give me some kind of nugget that I can use on the broadcast. But mostly I just like to check in and cultivate those relationships in general, which has always been something that I've enjoyed about this business, is that you get to meet really cool people like that. Then I always find a way to get something to eat around 5:30, make sure it's enough time before we kick off. And then around 6:55 for a 7:30 game, we rehearse. And then we're on the air for our open, usually around somewhere between 7:23 and 7:28. And then we call the game.
Gotcha. Look at that. I think I accidentally set you up too, because if you go to the tennis courts on Michigan State's campus, you will find that not a lot of tennis will be played on game day. That's where libations are a-flowing right there. So whether you're trying to serve up aces or you're trying to serve up some shots, I guess you could choose your own adventure there. But that's such a long day for you guys. And just really quick to kind of go along with preparing for the game, I have 2 questions left. They're both selfish because I need to work on myself, Noah, for this first one.
Okay.
Lord knows the Locked On Spartans listeners know that I can't pronunciate anyone's name for the life of me. And that is certainly, I would say, a line item of your job.
Sure.
Any tips, tricks? What have you done to make sure that you ace every name? Because you guys are giving some doozies sometimes.
Yeah, no doubt. Especially with these the former Pac-12 teams, because they've got a lot of West Coast flavor. And so
Yes.
The last couple of weeks with Oregon and Washington, we've had some really interesting ones. And the funny one was 2 weeks ago when we did that Washington-Michigan game. And great game, fun game. There were some tough names, and there was a fumble recovery. Jack Tuttle fumbled, and the 2 guys that were part of it had maybe the 2 biggest names. And I nailed it on the first go-around. The punch-out I nailed, and the recovery, and I felt great. And so then I was like, I'm going to show off a little bit, really showcase my skills. Yeah. So I went back to it, and I completely flubbed. And the one thing that I've recognized is if you do flub a name, don't try to just act like it didn't happen. I just acknowledge it head on. And I usually just say, I go, well, didn't work out for me that time. Or, I'll poke fun at myself because that's what needs to happen. But to answer the actual question, it takes a lot of practice. Night before, leading up, week up, leading up. It's a lot of repeat it until it becomes second nature, until it's just so clearly in my head that I don't even need to think twice about it. And I take a lot of pride in it. And if I do mess it up, I make sure I get it right the next time. It is not going to be a recurring issue.
Okay. I like that. And the last question I have, and I know we're short on time, but MSU has watched Cal Haladay play football for roughly 127 career games. All 127 career games, it is told by the broadcast crew that he plays with no gloves. And there's always like a tinge of we want you guys to be surprised when you hear this. So No, I need you to go back to like your Nickelodeon playoff days where you had to like do a little bit of acting with this. And I'm sure you'll have taken requests like you're a wedding DJ. I'm sure you're just over the moon right now. Can you, the first time Cal Haladay is like shown on camera, say, did you know, and I learned this on Locked On Spartans, that he doesn't wear gloves? Like if you could just hit just the audience with that. I'm sure that we could pencil you down for that. Is that fine?
Yeah, I'll see what I can do there. It's basically the college football version of Clayton Kershaw and Matt Stafford played or went to the same high school, right? That's the same thing where every single time, hey, do you know that these two guys went to high? We've heard it 500 times, 1,000%.
Yes.
But I will say, I love watching Cal Haladay play. I know that everybody needs to threes. And he's a great kid. And I just remember my first time doing Spartan games, he was the one guy that all the coaches were like, this is the guy. This is the guy. I think it was it must have been a sophomore year. And I'm like, really? This is the guy? And then I watched and I'm like, okay, this is the guy. And then last year in this matchup, he had that crazy, it wasn't even a scoop and score. It was just like a fumble recovery touchdown because it just popped right into his arm, right into his chest.
Yep.
I loved it. He was so alert. He always is. I really hope he has a fourth defensive touchdown because it'd be cool to be on the history call for a Michigan State record. So we'll see what happens. Let's put it that way.
That's
but
what I'm talking about.
No gloves necessary.
No gloves, and let them know. And it sounds so exasperated that like your partner Todd has to like almost catch you. Like I learned this on Locked On Spartan. Yeah. So thanks just in advance for that. I know you're good for it. But no, I cannot thank you enough for your time, your insight. We just heard how busy you are during these game weeks and game days. So to chew up this much time with us, cannot thank you enough, man. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anytime, Matt. Seriously.
Massive thanks again to Noah Eagle of NBC. Again, guys, you're going to be hearing his voice on Saturday if you're watching from home, or hey, hopefully if Michigan State pulls off the upset here, you're going to watch the highlights. That's going to be the man's voice right there. So let's get into 5 best bets to end this show. And if you missed it during the ad read, just to toot my own horn because God, life isn't always like this. For the third week in a row, we went 4-1 last week. All right, so we are 23-12 overall on the season. You heard that correctly, 23-12 overall in the season. Not as bragging as much as I am just saying that out loud because I can't believe it right now. We've done fine with 5 best bets in seasons past, but never like this. So if you want to fade these picks, you think we're going to come crashing down like a crater? Well, go ahead. This is all up to you. Again, FanDuel.com is where to place all these bets, guys. This week, we are going with Michigan State plus 5.5 points. It's going to be a race to 40. That's going to be a very low scoring total. I also think Michigan State can win this game outright just based on how good they are in the red zone. Surely they can't turn the ball over 17 times like they always do. That's got to regress to the mean eventually, right? And guys, I don't know. Coming off of a bye week, I like where Michigan State is at right now in this big homecoming game. Now, for the 4 other games that we are going to pick, I'm going to go with Cincinnati minus 2.5 over Sam Leavitt's Arizona Sun Devils. And, oh, wait a minute. That's the problem. Sam Leavitt isn't playing in this game. The backup quarterback is former Nebraska, former Georgia Tech quarterback Jeff Sims. I wouldn't pass this gentleman. I wouldn't trust him to pass me the butter at the kitchen table, let alone throw a pass in an actual regulation college football game. I do not like where things sit for the Sun Devils passing game right now, so we're going to go Bearcats minus 2.5 in that one. Texas, yeah, hook 'em. We're going to go minus 4 at home over Georgia. Georgia's, yes, of course, they lost the Alabama game. I think they've played in too many close games against inferior opponents where it's not just, oh, that's kind of a wonky blip on the radar. No, maybe they're just not as good as we all think they are, and this game being in Austin, I think that's going to be the game changer right there. Now, for Indiana, Nebraska, fascinated to watch this game, by the way. This is going to be a fun one. I'm going to go with under 51.5. This is going to be the toughest defense Indiana has played so far. And, well, for Nebraska, you're walking into the first sellout crowd at Indiana in quite some time. That could be a tougher environment. Of course, Husker fans will show up in some capacity, but hey, anytime you're on the road, could make it a little tough for your true freshman quarterback. So we're going to go under 51.5 points right there. And then to wrap things up, Tennessee plus 3 over Alabama. Alabama is getting flooded with bets and money from the public. And I also like Tennessee's defense a lot, guys. I think they could keep this pretty low scoring, keep the Tide within shooting range here. And then, hey, you know what? I trust Josh Heupel. After a few hiccups on offense, to at least turn something around for the Vols at home. So just to recap, Michigan State plus 5.5, Cincy minus 2.5 over ASU, Texas minus 4 over Georgia, under 51.5 in the Indiana-Nebraska game, and then Tennessee plus 3 over Alabama. All those numbers subject to change at FanDuel, of course. And guys, thank you so much for including Locked On Spartans part of your game day routine or your Friday routine. Whenever you're listening to this, really cannot thank you all enough. Now, if you're heading to the tailgates right now, let's mix in a water. Let's have some fun. Let's be safe out there. We will be back maybe Saturday night, probably Sunday at some point. Again, guys, I'm sorry to say I'm never going to talk to this couple ever again the rest of my life because I'm so resentful, but I will be at a wedding on Saturday night, so we will see how that all goes. Regardless, we will see you again by the time the weekend is over. I love every single one of you. If you're going to the tailgates, hey, have a shot of Fireball for me. Love you all. Go Green.